everybody. Welcome to the Blake Lively 30-point document series. I hope that you enjoyed the first one. It was a birth video and she knew it. As you can see on the screen, it is located on a playlist. So all of the videos will be placed in that playlist. So if you ever want to just listen to it all the way through. I wanted to do this series because I know the trial is around the corner. And next thing we know, it's May already, unless, again, the trial is moved one more time. But if it isn't, I feel like this series will be important for folks that want to kind of have a refresher of her 30-point document. Obviously, I don't want to almost centralize the 30-point document because that is not what they agreed to, they being the Wayfarer parties. Instead, what they agreed on is the 17-point side agreement. The final part of this series will actually be comparing the 30-point document with the 17-point side agreement that they actually agreed to and signed off on. So we're not only going to see the final version that Jamey Heath signed off as president of It Ends With Us Movie LLC, but also the original version of the 17-point side agreement, which is Exhibit A in her CRD. And so those are yet to come. But again, this particular one is our part 2, focusing on point 2. Point 2 says no more mention of Mr. Baldoni or Mr. Heath's previous pornography addiction or BL's lack of pornography consumption to BL or to other crew members. Okay, that's her point 2. And I want to go back real quickly because one of the things that they claimed about these points was that it was contemporaneous. And yet we know that the number 1 point actually didn't happen until May 23. And so that was probably one of the final complaints she had. Now we're going to look at the CRD, the complaint that she filed in New York, the first amended complaint and the second amended complaint, to look at what she actually says about this second point of the 30-point document. So we see that it is under the letter C of paragraph 39. It says, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath discussed their personal sexual experiences and previous porn addiction and tried to pressure Miss Lively to reveal details about her intimate life. So it says, during a car ride with Miss Lively, her assistant and driver, Mr. Baldoni, claimed to Miss Lively that he had been sexually abused by a former girlfriend, which he has since shared publicly. At the end of the story, Mr. Baldoni shared that it had caused him to re-examine his past. He then said, did I always ask for consent? No. Did I always listen when they said no? No. Mr. Baldoni claimed this was an example of how we all have things from which we can learn and grow. Miss Lively was unsettled by Mr. Baldoni's suggestion that he had engaged in sexual conduct without consent. When Miss Lively exited the car, her driver immediately remarked that he did not want Miss Lively to be alone with Mr. Baldoni going forward. Paragraph 40. On the first day of production, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath described their past sexual relationships to Miss Lively, including that one of them used to hook up with a woman. Mr. Baldoni said that he had decided the woman wasn't the one, so then Mr. Heath had gotten together with her. Miss Lively found this description of passing along a woman to be disrespectful and disturbing. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath often spoke of their previous pornography addiction. Mr. Baldoni would often reference pornography to Miss Lively. Hoping to shut the subject down, she said to him privately that she had never seen it. Later, when Mr. Baldoni was once again referencing his experiences with pornography, he revealed in front of other cast and crew that Miss Lively had never seen porn. It was an incredible invasion of her privacy to discuss any aspect of her intimate life with the cast and crew, much less reveal something that she had only told Mr. Baldoni to try to get him to stop talking about the subject with her. Mr. Baldoni engaged in other behaviors that were shocking and emotionally distressing. So, did she change anything when she went to New York? The only difference really is that the paragraph changed to paragraph 55. But everything that's written before is written again. And I didn't do this with the last one, but I just wanted to take a moment to actually give some feedback here. So the first thing that sticks out to me is he's being vulnerable with her about the sexual abuse that he experienced. And she ended up not even acknowledging that. Instead, she focuses on how he reflected on his own experience and how it made him realize that there's things that he would have done differently. And she made that SH. Just think about that. I mean, and and I'm going to read something in the timeline that will explain why he would have even shared this with her, which would have lined up with the movie still, and why he could have still been talking about the movie when he shared this situation with her. And also, again, he has talked about it. So another thing that sticks out to me is the story on paragraph 56. Now, I didn't do my own deep dive on this. Other people have researched this themselves, and some people came to the conclusion that this story was actually about Natasha Heath. And I know back in the day, hookup means different things, right? Hookup means different things now. So it doesn't have to be of a sexual nature. It could just be that you're hanging out with somebody, right? And it turned out that he had gone, I think, possibly on a date with Natasha, and realized that they were just not compatible, or they were not the one for each other. And so she ended up dating Heath, who eventually married Natasha. So the way she described this, as if they were passing each other around, if it truly was about Natasha, is again a gross over exaggeration of probably what the story truly was, because there is a podcast where they discuss this. So I am going to assume that if it is about Natasha, that the chances are very high that the way they spoke about it on the podcast is the way that Jamey and Justin may have talked about it with Blake Lively. And so that again reasserts that she tends to do gross over exaggerations to make people assume the worst. The other piece of it is this section, number 57. One of the things that we're going to see, and I believe it's in the deposition of Jamey Heath, is he said, "I've never had a porn addiction." And then again, that drives home the point of how Blake Lively tends to merge like Justin Baldoni and Jamey Heath into one person, and tries to make grievances about both people that she might not actually have for both people, and might just have it for one person. As you can tell from her, like when she expounds on it, she only gives an example of Justin Baldoni. She doesn't give an example of when Jamey Heath would have said anything about porn addiction. She just says he did. He spoke often about it. Okay, just give one. Just give one, Blake. And I think she couldn't, because as Jamey Heath said, he never had a porn addiction. So this is the first amended complaint, and Blake Lively brings up the pornography addiction for the very first time on paragraph 7. It says, Miss Lively brought this lawsuit because she was one of the women or two that Mr. Baldoni 1,000,000% made uncomfortable on the set of the film. As detailed in her opening complaint and below, Miss Lively was disturbed by the fact that Mr. Baldoni spoke about his pornography addiction, divulged information about his sex life, made derogatory, degrading, and sexual comments, described his own genitalia, improvised intimacy that had not been rehearsed, choreographed, or discussed with Miss Lively in advance, and added graphic content to the script, including multiple new scenes with nudity and a chaotic and violative birthing scene for which he cast a friend as her OBGYN, among other things. Okay, so what is interesting to me is that it only talks about Mr. Baldoni's pornography addiction. Now, she doesn't remove Jamey Heath in the later paragraphs, but as far as she's concerned, this is about just Justin Baldoni. And so why did she bring Jamey Heath into it? Why did she feel the need to make it sound like he has a porn addiction? So let's check out what else is available on this particular complaint. Okay, so she added a few things now. So it says Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath, so still kept Heath in there, discussed their personal sexual experiences and previous porn addiction, and tried to pressure Miss Lively to reveal details about her intimate life. So during a car ride with Miss Lively, her assistant and driver, I want you to keep that in mind. She says, and driver, because it's going to be important for paragraph number 93. During a car ride with Miss Lively, her assistant and driver, Mr. Baldoni, claimed to Miss Lively that he had been sexually abused by a former girlfriend, which he has since shared publicly. At the end of the story, Mr. Baldoni shared that it had caused him to re-examine his past. He then said, and this is new, right? They bold and italicize it. Did I always ask for consent? No. Did I always listen when they said no? No. Mr. Baldoni claimed this was an example of how we all have things from which we can learn and grow. Miss Lively was alarmed by Mr. Baldoni's suggestion that he had engaged in sexual conduct without consent. When Miss Lively exited the car, her driver immediately remarked that he did not want Miss Lively to be alone with Mr. Baldoni going forward. I want you to think about the fact that her driver says that, right? Because who this driver is changes in her text message in paragraph 93. And for me, who this driver is begs the question, why would this person say this when their job wouldn't ever leave her alone? And also, she ends up taking Justin Baldoni on an airplane ride with her and her kids after this, because she later on admits this happened in April 2023. And we know that they flew out the final week of April because Justin was feeling homesick. So she offered to have him fly out on this plane with her and her kids so they could work on the script, right? Unless she's trying to tell us that this happened on the final day of April. There is no way that this conversation didn't happen after she had already flown him to California. So what made her comfortable enough to fly all the way to California with her and her children with this man, like not somebody she wants to be around because he's SHing her? Make it make sense, folks. It doesn't make sense to me. So paragraph 93. Later in July 2024, in connection with another discussion, Miss Lively recounted this consent story to a female cast member in a text message. It's crazy how above reproach they feel. It's like he said to me about his previous sexual encounters when we were in my car with my assistant, and here we go, folks, my security. Now, people have told me that her drivers are sometimes her security guards. So I thought that's real interesting. So her security guard said don't ever be alone with him, but literally she won't be alone. She has her security guards, him being one of them. Right? He said, have I always asked for consent? No. Have I always listened when they said no? No. People show you who they are. Believe them the first time. I agree with you, Blake, and we believe you to be who you are. Not who you say you are, who you show you are. So yes, I think that's great advice. People show you who they are. Believe them the first time. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. And there's a lot of shame on you. Okay, paragraph 94. In fact, Mr. Baldoni publicly acknowledges that he has struggled with consent. He echoed language similar to the words he spoke to Miss Lively in the car ride described above in a podcast interview, in which he admitted that he had crossed boundaries and lines in my teens and 20s with respect to obtaining consent, a flaw which he blamed on his early exposure to pornography. You start to think that this is what women want, and in porn, as we know, no means yes or try harder. On the first day of production, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath described their past sexual relationships to Miss Lively, including that one of them used to hook up with a woman. Mr. Baldoni said that he had decided the woman wasn't the one, so then Mr. Heath had gotten together with her. Miss Lively found the description of passing along a woman to be disrespectful and disturbing. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath often spoke of their previous pornography addiction. Mr. Baldoni would often reference pornography to Miss Lively, hoping to shut the subject down. She said to him privately that she had never seen it. Later, when Mr. Baldoni was once again referencing his experiences with pornography, he revealed in front of other cast and crew that Miss Lively had never seen porn. It was an incredible invasion of privacy to discuss any aspect of her intimate life with the cast and crew, much less revealing something that she had told only to Mr. Baldoni to try to get him to stop talking about the subject with her. So the last two paragraphs there match what she said in her original complaint. I will say that this is wild to me to think about when she's the one that included the porn line into the It Ends With Us movie. The porn line where she's like, oh, I feel like I'm in a porn. That line was not there. She added that, or Ryan Reynolds did. So why add a line about porn when you found it so offensive when Justin Baldoni spoke about it? Why make your character bring it up? For what reason? That's why it sometimes feels like it was Ryan Reynolds kind of chiding Justin Baldoni. Just a little bit. I do want to briefly touch on this paragraph, even though it's not about the pornography addiction of Justin Baldoni. On paragraph 335, she said, online vitriol towards Miss Lively has continued unabated. For example, on January 31, 2025, Miss Lively's personal Instagram, on which she had nearly 45 million follows, she had to say how many followers she had, right? Was inundated with pornographic content tagging her account profile handle. In an article titled Blake Lively Instagram Flooded with Porn Amid Baldoni War, TMZ reported that Blake Lively had been targeted with a massive troll campaign amid her legal war with Justin Baldoni. Her Instagram profile is flooded with porn. Meta responded publicly by stating, this kind of online harassment is wrong and we condemn it. We are removing the content that violates our policies and will continue to monitor for additional violating posts. Oh, I actually never knew that it was Meta that removed it, because this is what had happened for me. I heard about it and I said, y'all, this is appalling. This should not be done. I'm not okay with this. And people came into my, basically my DMs and said, don't fall for it. Blake Lively is doing this because if she wanted to remove it, she can remove it in an instant. But she's been waiting for people to notice that she's being tagged in these so she could put it in her lawsuit. When she ended up using it in her lawsuit, I was like, I see what you mean. So I decided not to share with you the second amended complaint because there were no changes made. You can fact check me by going to document number 521 in the Lively versus Wayfarer case. And so the next thing we're going to look at is what Wayfarer's complaints have said around it. Now, the lawsuit from Wayfarer versus the New York Times did not include anything in regards to that. So what we're going to be looking at is their actual complaint against Blake Lively and Company. Okay, so this is the complaint from Wayfarer versus Blake Lively and Company. I want to be clear about something. I am not saying that Blake Lively didn't have the right to feel however she felt about things. But do I think that her response to everything is proportioned to what happened? No, I think it's above and beyond what happened. Like, it was overkill. It was too much for what the moment required. And so a part of me wonders, why does she escalate it to this level when this is something that could easily have been talked through and actually was talked through prior to June? So what happened during the break? What did her and her husband talk about that suddenly changed everything for her? That suddenly, even though things got resolved, she started to claim it never got resolved, and as if they had never discussed any of these issues. Now, some of these issues, I don't think they did. Not in, or at least if they did, not in the context that she portrays it in her complaint by the time we, as the public, consume it. So they're learning her narrative at the same time as us. And that is a problem. There are a handful of things I can believe, and I do believe, that she addressed in real time. Everything else, I believe, was created after the fact. So I'm not going to read everything on paragraph 100 because it's part of a different complaint that she has. So I'm going to start on the portion that says, in another instance. It says, in another instance, as Lively and Baldoni were developing their scenes, Lively said, I don't want it to look like porn. Which is so ironic, right? When she literally adds a line in the movie that says, I feel like I'm in a porn, or whatever she says, right? So she tells him on one hand she doesn't want things to look like porn, and then turns around and adds a line like that. I don't want it to look like porn. And then offered up that she had never seen porn in her life, a very personal fact. Baldoni complimented her and said that's wonderful, because unfortunately he was first exposed to it when he was 10 years old and struggled with a porn addiction for a period of his life. He writes openly about this in both his books, Boys Will Be Human, written for young boys, and Man Enough, written for men, addressing pornography as a societal problem. Anyone who knows or has done any research on Baldoni would have knowledge of this, and it can in no way be characterized as inappropriate, especially after opening the door to the discussion by disclosing something highly personal. At every turn, Baldoni was entrapped. Moreover, Heath, who had nothing to do with this exchange and has never had a porn addiction or even mentioned porn in Lively's presence, was falsely and knowingly lumped into this accusation. Now, I noticed that they don't discuss whether or not Baldoni did disclose it to a larger group of people. Now, obviously, I can understand if Blake Lively found that offensive, and I have no problem with that. But again, did it need to escalate to this level that we are sitting here right now in the year of 2026? Discussing this? I don't think so. So the first amended complaint was exactly like the original complaint, so I'm not going to be showing that. Instead, you can just fact check me by going to document number 50 in the Lively versus Wayfarer case. We are now going to go into the timeline, and there we are going to read text messages between Justin Baldoni and Melissa Nathan, where he shares how basically Blake Lively used his vulnerability against him and tried to claim it was SH. So this is September 1, 2024 in the timeline that Wayfarer provided. It is incredibly pixelated. It's hard to read. I remember Jamey Heath in his text messages that we got to see was talking about how is it so pixelated when it looks so crystal clear when they originally put it together. It is what it is. I'm not even going to try to read what Melissa Nathan said. I'll just tell you what she did say. Basically, she told Justin Baldoni that she ended up watching It Ends With Us, and it actually wasn't as bad as she thought. And she was talking about how powerful it was the moment when she realized the abuse, right? Now, I did read a person had written a comment that said that actually Lily always knew that she was being abused. So that person didn't actually think this was an accurate portrayal of what Lily's experience was in the book. And perhaps that's true because Justin does say that this is not part of the book. I will say, as a person that didn't know the book and watched the movie, I thought that piece was powerful. Because I remember watching the movie thinking, well, wasn't that an accident? And I felt bad thinking it was an accident. So when she remembered, I was like, oh my word. Like, that's that. I mean, it stayed with me. It was probably the more powerful piece of the whole movie for me. So he says, well, the reality is that that's what happened to me. That's why I designed it this way. When I was 20, I lost my virginity to my emotionally abusive girlfriend in a non-consensual way. And when I was 35, I started remembering. I struggled with the memories and not thinking it was what happened, or thinking that it was my fault or that I wanted it. So I was trying to figure out how to make this movie work. And that's how the memories came into being. The book did not have any of that. Ironically, when I told that to Blake, that was one of the things that she put in her list against me, LOL. All to say, there is an explanation of why Justin Baldoni was talking about this with Blake Lively that was actually connected to the movie. And it was describing why he wanted to film it the way that he did. And so it is really interesting that then Blake Lively turned it around and tried to weaponize it against him. The next thing that we're going to do is look at the deposition for Justin Baldoni. So this is Justin Baldoni's deposition. And it starts off with a question from Gottlieb on page 77. It says, okay, I'm most interested in what you said publicly about how, in your view, being exposed to pornography repeatedly affects one's view of consent. Do you recall giving a talk called Boys Will Be Human, a talk on healthy masculinity with Justin Baldoni? And Justin says, I wrote a book called Boys Will Be Human, and I imagine I've done a talk or two. Yeah. Some interviews about the subject of the book. Is this a speech that I gave, or is this an interview that I gave? This is during an interview, and I want to read you what you said. You said, when you hit 11 or 12 years old and your friends have a phone and maybe you don't, and you're being shown things for the first time, and then you start to think this is what women want, and in porn, as we know, no means yes or try harder. It starts to become very confusing, which is definitely something that happened to me. And then it goes to page 78, and I would think that it would go straight into it, but it looks like something was cut off. So if I scroll back up, I don't think that they're the right pages here. Because this is document 1072-4 saying it's page 78, but it doesn't look like a continuation of this other page over here. So we're just going to go with what we have here. It says consent. But what I'm essentially saying is there's even a possibility that in my teens and 20s, I wasn't aware. Question. Well, literally what you said is, as read, I'm sure I have crossed boundaries and lines in my teens and 20s, not even thinking about it simply because of the porn I was consuming. So that's what you said. And my question to you is, do I understand your testimony to be that you were essentially making that up in order to make other men feel that you were relatable to them? Objection. No, I'm sure I had crossed boundaries in my teens and 20s. I'm sure I have. And do you think that was because of the exposure that you had to this kind of toxic pornography? I'm sure that was part of it. It was also a different time. And part of why I wrote the book was that consent wasn't taught to boys. And I wanted to make sure that we taught consent to boys and men. So that's where it ends. Okay, so we're going to start here for Jamey Heath's deposition. He says, so no more mention of Baldoni or Heath's previous pornography addiction. I don't have a pornography addiction, so certainly she wouldn't have never read that, and I don't know what that refers to. So no, that was not discussed. So basically, it brings back the point that she added Heath for what reason? Did she talk about Mr. Baldoni referencing pornography addiction during this meeting? I believe she mentioned something about it. Okay, did she talk about wanting to neither her nor her employees to hear personal experiences of other people's sex lives, including as it relates to spouses or others? What number are you reading, please? 3. I think she said something about that. Did she talk about number 4? Did she say that she wanted no discussion about with her or her employees of personal times that physical consent was not given in sexual acts either, as either the abuser or the abused? I do not recall that. You don't recall that? I do not. Now, obviously, Justin Baldoni recalls it. So it's not surprising that Jamey doesn't recall it simply because he wasn't the person receiving that. So, but it was discussed because Justin Baldoni acknowledges that in his text message with Melissa. Okay, did she recount a story in which Mr. Baldoni talked about times that he had engaged in actions with women without consent? No. She didn't talk about that? Okay, did she talk about the description? Anyone describing their own genitalia to her and asking that not happen? No, she didn't talk about Mr. Let me rephrase that. No, not that I remember in any sense. So this next portion that I'm going to read off of Jamey Heath's deposition is going to confuse my brain a little bit. So I know that the comment section will let me know why it still makes sense what he said. So earlier on, he said that there was no conversation about him having a porn addiction because he's never had a porn addiction. So this line kind of confused me. And it says there was no indication that we were supposed to take another step. We thought the step was done. We talked about it. She got it off her, even though we disagreed. I still contend to this day that most of what she is saying, either all of it, either is twisted or fabricated. She says I talked about my genitals. I still haven't heard anybody ask me. She said I had a porn addiction in her complaint. No one has asked me where that came from as it pertains to me. But we talked about it. So that's the part that confused me a little bit because he said earlier that they never talked about it because he didn't have one. But with that said, it is really interesting now that she says that he also talked about his genitals. So she keeps doing this thing where she lumps other people into an accusation that doesn't fit the person. So the last thing we're going to look at is Blake Lively's response to the 56.1 statements. And what I found there was interesting, and I'll show you why I think it's interesting. So what I found interesting about this particular response is there was only 2 mentions of pornography in this document of undisputed facts. And Blake Lively does not provide any additional facts around this pornography thing, this pornography accusation. So there's only 2 statements around this. So a part of me feels like she realized that maybe it's not a winning hand. I don't know, but I find it very interesting that she did not introduce any additional undisputed facts in her mind. People might be like, well, maybe she didn't put it in because she knows it's going to be disputed, but she put a bunch of things that are disputed in her undisputed, facts section. So I don't think that's the reason. So here is what it said. Paragraph 93 said, Baldoni has publicly discussed his prior addiction to pornography on his podcast, which is aimed at male audiences, and in his published books. And so she stated, undisputed. So this paragraph, I'm actually not going to reread. You can pause and read it for yourself. And the main reason I'm not reading it is because I've already read this in point 1. You can watch that video if you would like, but you can also pause this video and read it for yourself. The only thing I will read is that she says here, Heath's and Baldoni's references to his prior pornography addiction. And they're only putting that not because Heath does have a prior pornography addiction, but simply because it's stating what she claimed in the January 4, 2024 meeting. So that is all of the documents that we're looking at in regards to point 2. So my final thoughts are that Blake Lively has a right to feel uncomfortable. I don't know necessarily if I want to have a conversation around pornography myself. Not necessarily, but there is a context in those conversations. Justin Baldoni has been on record, has done a TED Talk, has done a book, has done podcasts. So we know how he talks about it. And I've heard him talk about it. And if he spoke to her as he spoke in all of those places, and she never claims he doesn't talk to her the same way as he talks on his podcast. I don't know. Blake Lively, I think, made mountain out of a molehill. Someone told me something about like a mosquito into an elephant. I can't take this point very seriously, that she was truly as offended as she claims, when she literally added a line about porn into It Ends With Us that never existed before she wrote it in. Unless, again, it was Ryan Reynolds. So if you found this video valuable in any way, I hope you like it. And if you want to see the rest of the points, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Thanks. Bye.